The word they always use is framework.
Three-part framework.
Learn these frameworks.
Or like systems,
productivity system,
or hacks. Hacks is big.
Call them hacks, call them habits.
I guess this started because a few years ago I went embarrassingly deep into the self-help productivity corner of the internet. And the part that stuck out to me was this idea of goal design. The idea that it's not just about what you want to do, but how you set the goal that has a real impact on our psychology. And according to a lot of these experts, the right framework could
massively boost your odds of actually achieving the goals.
And there's data to support this. Certain types of goals have been shown to increase goal-oriented behavior or reduce anxiety or increase self-confidence. So I spent a pretty long time trying these journals and routines and systems and hacks, and none of it worked for me. And after looking online, it seems that I am not the only one. So I guess my question is, what the hell? But maybe in a more productive sense, I want to know, is there actually a perfect way to set a goal? If there is, how do I figure that out, and how does it even work? And maybe most importantly, why did all of that advice from these apparent experts not work for me? So I've been working on this video for I've been working on this video for a couple months now. And at first I thought it was going to be a how to accomplish your goals video. But after doing the research, it is not an accomplish your goals video. Instead, this is a how not to waste a whole bunch of time focusing on something that turns out doesn't really matter that much kind of video. Let's start here. If you have watched any productivity content, you know that it gets pretty repetitive pretty quick. It usually starts with us, and then there's our goal, and then there's this gap. And the claim is that the right system will bridge the gap and help us achieve whatever goal we want. And then of course, whoever's making the video gives us their version of the system, and we're promised that if we follow that system and ideally buy their course later, then we will have all of our goals within our grasp and easier and faster, and everything will be great. And this is misleading for a couple reasons. First, those systems are actually goals. It sounds catchy to say set systems, not goals, but a system is just a different type of goal. When someone says system, they're usually just talking about a goal that focuses on ourselves and not anything else. So in research, this is often called a process goal or a mastery goal. If we wanted to get a six-pack, then a process goal might be do 50 crunches every day. And the reigning wisdom from these productivity videos seems to be that we set big goals to define a direction, but then the process goals, or the goals that focus on themselves, or what they call systems, is how we actually make progress. And that's fine, because in a lot of ways it's true. It is not the whole truth. Process goals are really good for beginners. They show benefits to performance and self-efficacy. That's our confidence in our ability to do a task. But then performance goals, as in goals that focus on not ourselves, but other things or an outcome, also showed significant positive effect on performance. So both goals had a positive impact. And the same thing happens when we look at other aspects of goal achievement, like cognitive anxiety, for example. Generally, cognitive anxiety is better when we set goals focusing on ourselves, and worse if we set goals focusing on other people or a result. But this study showed a large significant reduction in cognitive anxiety even though they set performance goals. And this study in basketball players saw no significant difference in cognitive anxiety when they were assigned goals that focused on others and just a regular control. So again, both types of goals had similar benefits. It just depends on who we're talking about. And this pattern goes on and on. There are a bunch of different goal types. We can have approach versus avoidant goals. We can have long-term or short-term goals. We can get difficult or easy goals, or somewhere in the middle. We can focus on ourselves or other people. There are a million different ways to do this. So how do we pick the perfect goal type or perfect system to help us make the most progress towards our goal? Well, we can look at a system that's already insanely popular. This is one of the systems from Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is an insanely popular book. I'm sure everyone knows what that is. James Clear has a few tricks for creating goal systems. He wants us to focus on one goal at a time, which makes sense. That's a time management thing. He also wants us to set a middle difficulty goal, which also makes sense. Locke and Latham theorized that harder goals would demand more effort and therefore give higher performance, and their theory was later amended because really impossible goals would probably just make us quit. So somewhere in the middle is probably the best. And then James Clear says that we should make our environment work for us. If the goal is to drink less beer, we shouldn't have beer in the fridge. And this also makes a ton of sense psychologically. There's this idea called salience, where basically the thing that is the most in your face will get the most of your attention. Think when your phone lights up and makes a sound, it's impossible to ignore, but if it's on do not disturb, it's pretty easy. So all of this is good advice. It's all backed by an amount of psychological evidence or data or theory. And that's true, it's all good advice. But he's still missing experience level, feedback types, sex, age, Is the goal self-set or self by another person? Self-efficacy, confidence. He's missing effective cognitive variables like attention span and cognitive anxiety. Is the goal approach or avoidant? There's a bunch of variables here, and they all matter. The perfect framework would have to account for a ton of variables. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that we were able to do that. We were able to account for all of these variables. In a couple weeks, something would inevitably change. And so we'd have to go back to the drawing board and redo the entire thing. And eventually, we'd spend so long building systems that we wouldn't actually get any work done. I remember like writing that line as I was researching for the script. I like wrote that in the margins of my notes and thinking like, oh fuck, because that's what I used to do. I would try like habit stacks and frameworks and journals and like all of these different systems and things, and none of them worked. And when something didn't work for me, I assumed it was the system's fault, so I'd go and try to make another one or make the current system better. My thesis for this video is not that productivity influencers are lying to you or that their advice is bad. My thesis is that I spent far too long worrying about organizing and optimizing routines and frameworks and not enough time actually doing the work. And I think the way that this content is often presented like feeds into that. Let's go back to the anatomy of the productivity video. It really relies on two claims that, if true, make this whole thing work. The first claim is that you will fail a goal unless you have the right system in place. And the second claim is that failing goals is bad, which tells us that we should be perfecting a system and then starting a goal so that we reduce the chances of failing. But like, there's the trap, right? Like, it's so obvious now. Perfecting a system isn't actually possible, but it's so compelling, right? Because it clears me of any personal responsibility. If I go out there and I fail a goal, it's difficult to look myself in the mirror and say, you were lazy or you failed. It's far easier if I just get to say, well, I guess I didn't have the right system this time. Content like this is usually a lead magnet for a course or a book of some kind. So if I'm a customer and I'm made to believe that I could become a pasty David Goggins just with the right system, that's really, really good for someone selling a system. So we've established that designing goals and systems can be helpful and useful, but that in the real world, and especially the way they're framed with a lot of this advice, they're often more of a waste of time or a hindrance. So what do we do? This is Edwin Locke and Gary Latham. They are widely considered to be the founding fathers of goal-setting theory. They've spent decades researching motivation and performance and achievement. And this is a paper they wrote detailing their 35 years of goal-setting research. And at the very bottom of the paper, just before the references, is what I think to be the most impactful part of this entire paper. Figure 4, essential elements of goal-setting theory and the high-performance cycle. It shows that the goal is a beginning of a cycle, and that cycle repeats over and over again with new challenges and new motivations and new variables and new goals being made to overcome those new challenges. This is so cool to me and honestly relieving because it shows that goals are supposed to be redesigned. They're supposed to be edited. They're supposed to be failed. I never found the perfect system because I was looking for it on YouTube. Instead, I should have created a system with duct tape and cardboard, super imperfect. I should have gone for it until it failed, gone back to the drawing board and picked a new brand of duct tape to try one more time and just done that over and over again. Instead, I was over here thinking that if I had a more expensive desk setup, I would have been more productive. That's a real thought that I really had for like a year, which is very embarrassing, but it's true. I feel like so many of these productivity influencers have turned productivity into an aesthetic. They make day in the life videos that are gorgeous and pristine, and they have desk setups that cost 30 grand. But that is not the real world, and that wasn't even them when they got started. The research shows that we build systems as we go, not perfectly from the start. To be honest, I made this video because I needed it, like 3 years ago. I needed someone to tell me that these influencers were giving me one-sided advice. Only focus on yourself, trust the process, build systems, not goals, separate outcome from result. We've all heard these a million times if you've been anywhere near the space, and they're not wrong, but we can focus on the process and the end goal. We can worry about ourselves and still want to compete against others. We can set short and long-term goals. We can make them difficult and we make others really easy. I really wish somebody had told me that I wasn't going to use all of these like journals after 4 days. I wish somebody had told me that I was going to make plans and I was going to try hacks and habits and 90% of them weren't going to stick. And most of all, I think I wish someone had told me that that was okay. In fact, that was a good thing because that's how this is supposed to work. Bye.